Vice President Joe Biden is taking heat from his Democratic colleagues over his continued support for the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits the use of federal funds for abortion.
And while the amendment does, in fact, make exceptions for cases of rape, incest, or when a mother's life is in danger, it puts the current frontrunner at odds with other presidential contenders who have wasted no time slamming his position. Joining us to discuss the state of the Democratic primary and the challenges on the road ahead is the Hill's national correspondent, Reid Wilson. He has been on the campaign trail with the candidates, now back in the House. Great to see you, Reid.
Hey.
Do you think this Biden issue, it's not just the Hyde Amendment, Ryan Grimm's also talking about how he pushed to narrow the contraception mandate in Obamacare. I mean, he has been a Democrat over the years where it was the mainstream of the party to basically say, like, I don't support abortion myself, but I'm kind of okay with it in certain circumstances. Is that going to be an issue for him in the campaign?
So he's a Democrat of another age, pre this sort of moment within the Democratic Party. And I've been sort of thinking about the field in terms of timescapes. Who are they talking to? Joe Biden is talking about the past, about going back to something earlier. And by the way, we've even seen a bunch of the Democratic rest of the Democratic candidates criticizing him for that. Well, hey, we don't want to go back. We want to move forward.
Right.
That sort of forward-backward language. Elizabeth Warren strikes me as sort of the candidate of now, the candidate who's got the most plans that can be immediately voted on and debated in Congress. Kamala Harris and some other candidates seem to me to be the candidate of the near future. Here are the big plans that we do over 8 or 10 years. And then Bernie Sanders is the guy who wants to totally reinvent the country.
Blow up the whole
and that'll probably take 20 or 30 years to do. So he's call him the candidate of the far future. But that, like, Joe Biden is the candidate of the past. He's the candidate. Watch his announcement video, and he's got footage of D-Day and raising the flag at Iwo Jima and Martin Luther King and all of these sort of black and white clips of America's past. And you didn't really see that in any of the rest of the Democratic field. And that makes me wonder whether or not a Democratic primary voter is really going to vote to go back, whether that back is to the Clinton era or the Obama era, even as recently as Obama. But the fact is, he's talking about the past.
I mean, they're betting very heavily on Obama nostalgia.
Nostalgia.
That is the core of the campaign.
And this notion of electability, the notion that he is the candidate who's most likely to beat Donald Trump in November. If that's what Democratic voters are thinking about when they go to the polls, he's by far the front runner.
Do you think, and a lot of Democratic voters say that is what they're thinking about, right? And you look at the polls, he's, new poll out showing him ahead of Trump in Texas, right? I would not get too excited about that, folks. Hold your horses on that one.
I'll totally make the case that Texas is a swing state.
It could be. I mean, it could be. But what could puncture that sense of electability? Like, if he seems to be more and more out of step with the party and constantly having to kind of explain where he is and apologize for past things, does that end up puncturing that electability narrative?
So I think that the two things that can possibly puncture the bubble, pop the bubble, if you will, are one, if a true rival emerges. Bernie Sanders is running close to Joe Biden on the national stage, but he's not really a true front runner at the moment. If somebody like an Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, somebody like that, jumps up in the polls and presents a real challenge, and Biden has to engage with them. Remember, Joe Biden has not engaged with the Democratic field so far. He's fighting President Trump.
Right.
And that's what he wants, right? He doesn't want to be one of the 17 candidates. He wants to be the candidate facing Donald Trump. That's good for him.
Do we have any numbers on which Democrat is doing the best as a proportion of their support with the youth? You know what I mean?
With younger voters? Yeah. I mean,
I know that sounds like what are the young kids voting for?
Get off my lawn.
But I'm just wondering who's, because look, I think the assumption was going to be Beto. Now people would think probably Mayor Pete.
It's not Beto.
It's not Beto.
It's not Beto.
But Mayor Pete, but Bernie Sanders. Young people. If you walk around Santa Monica, let me tell you, if you want to sound cool, you talk about Bernie Sanders. Which, speaking of candidates of the past,
is that how you sound cool in Santa Monica?
That's how I sound cool all over the place. Nice. I feel like that's right. Bernie bros. They don't know the difference.
Sanders is doing best among younger voters, no question. But also,
there's an incredible age divide, actually.
There is.
I mean, if you were just doing voters under 40, Sanders would be the front runner.
Oh yeah, I think so. He's doing the best with those voters younger voters by and large. But let's not forget that 2/3 of the Democratic electorate is going to be over the age of 45, and more than a third is going to be over the age of 65. So this is still sort of when you've got 70% of the entire electorate as white voters, and a disproportionate number of those voters are older.
Yeah.
You know, older white voters still matter, and that's why Joe Biden is.
How's the debate structure going to play into all this? The early debate, the first debate.
The first debate gives candidates a moment. And this whole campaign is all about how do you capture the moment when you pop. Pete Buttigieg popped early and did really well to sort of capture that moment, raised a whole bunch of money, and the tail lasted for 2 or 3 months. I'd say he's probably, his influence is waning now, but he did really well to sort of capture the moment when he got to that CNN town hall and said nasty things about Mike Pence. That jumped him up into the conversation, and he was able to capture that. Who's going to be able to capture that in a 2-hour debate when you're standing next to 9 other people who also want the same job? We'll see. Everybody's going to be, looking for that zinger moment that's going to be replayed on Rising and every other TV show nonstop over the next 2 months, or month, I suppose, between the first debate and the second debate. And the question again, and I think we're seeing a preview here with this Joe Biden stuff, is how much is he going to be sucked into the fray of the Democratic primary? Right now, he's above the fray. He's fighting President Trump. If he becomes one of the 20 or one of the however many who are actually viable, then that becomes a problem for him, and we suddenly get that rival.
He's also got kind of a light schedule, so is he battle tested and actually ready to hit the debate stage, or is he going to have that like Obama flat performance after having been out of the game for a while?
Every president or vice president has that flat moment, because you don't stand on a stage with an equal when you are president of the United States. You stand on the stage with somebody who's introducing you or being friendly to you or deferential to you. Suddenly you've got a real opponent who's taking shots at you, and that can be a little startling after 4 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you are looking at how important California is going to be in this contest, and particularly for Kamala Harris. I think we got the story up here. Kamala Harris braces for California fight in key 2020 test. Tell us what you're looking at.
So I was out in San Francisco at the California Democratic Convention this year. This is not just her home state, but her home city, the place where she got her start as district attorney before she became California's attorney general. And you'd think that she would be the overwhelming favorite in her home state. But Elizabeth Warren drew 6,000 people to a rally in Oakland the night before.
Wow.
Elizabeth Warren got by far the most raucous reception of any Democrat speaking before the convention. Bernie Sanders sort of suffered a little bit because he went on Sunday morning instead of Saturday morning when most people had gone home, but he still got a pretty raucous reception too. The fact is, no Democratic candidate has ever won the nomination without winning their home state. Kamala Harris is tied for second in her home state with Bernie Sanders right now. Joe Biden is the front runner, according to the one survey that we've seen lately. But the fact is, she's got to win here. It is a Super Tuesday state. There are several other contenders who also will face a Super Tuesday test. Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts, votes that day. Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro, Texas, votes that day, et cetera, et cetera. Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, Colorado, votes that day. But Kamala Harris in California, it's the biggest state in the country, which is great for her. That's why we're talking about her, is because she is a senator from the largest state in the country. It's also the downfall because it's the toughest state to win. It is the most geographically diverse, economically diverse, ethnically diverse. It is a really difficult state to win, and because of the delegate rules, if you win 15% of the vote in some tiny Republican congressional district in the northeast of the state that Democrats don't pay attention to, you still get a delegate to the convention. So we're going to see Pete Buttigieg, who was campaigning in the Central Valley, going after some Republican-leaning territory that still has some Democratic votes.
Interesting.
We're going to see other candidates delegate hunting around Kamala Harris's own state.
They're trying to dice and slice it. Interesting. Slice and dice it. That's the way that's said.
I like the way you said it. All right.
Reid, thank you.
So much.
You got it.
Next on Rising, political historian and the man who has correctly predicted the last 9 elections, Alan Lichtman, says, quote, impeachment is now on everyone's lips.
Not mine, but will that be a help or a hindrance as Democrats attempt to win control of the White House in 2020? Lichtman's going to share his thoughts. That as Rising rolls on.